In the heart of a glittering royal court, people were dying quietly, not in battle, not by execution, but during meals, in their beds, after a single cup of wine. One heir after another fell ill, sudden fevers, burning throats, bodies that failed within hours. Every death came with an explanation, and no one believed any of them, because in this court, everyone understood the truth. Someone was poisoning the bloodline. No one said it openly. Fear did not need language. Servants tasted every dish. Physicians were summoned for the smallest headache. A cough could empty a room. A pale face could start a rumor that never died. This was not a palace. It was a waiting room for death. And into this place, a young woman was sent. She arrived dressed in silk, welcomed by ceremony, announced as a blessing, a solution to a problem growing more urgent with every funeral. She was barely 16, and her role was painfully clear. She was expected to replace the dead. She came from a different world, a world of music, books, and ideas. A place where conversation mattered more than titles, where intellect was admired, and where a woman could exist as more than her body. Here, none of that mattered. From the moment she crossed the gates, she felt it. Conversations stopped when she entered a room. Smiles froze, eyes followed every movement she made. Even the walls seemed alert, as if listening. Her husband did not see a wife. He saw an answer. He had loved once, and that love had ended in death. Now grief was inconvenient. The dynasty demanded a son, and demanded him quickly. Their marriage was not a bond. It was a calculation. Then she heard the name spoken only in whispers. The stepmother. A woman with ambition, with sons of her own, and with an uncanny closeness to every unexplained death. There was no proof against her. There never was. But in this court, belief was enough. The young bride understood the danger immediately. She was not a person here. She was a womb walking through a minefield, and if she failed, she would not be remembered. She would be explained away. At night, she lay awake listening to footsteps, wondering which door they would stop at next. This was her beginning, not love, not power, but survival. If you want to follow this descent into royal paranoia, poison, and scandal buried by history, subscribe to the channel now. The story only gets darker from here. Before the court learned to fear her name, she had belonged to another world. Her name was Sophia Charlotte. She was born into a household where silence was never enforced and curiosity was never punished. In Hanover, she was not raised to rule, but to think. Music filled the rooms where she grew up. Philosophers visited like old friends. Books were read aloud and argued over. Questions were encouraged. For a young woman of her time, this was rare and dangerous training. Sophia Charlotte learned early that the mind could be a refuge. She played instruments with ease. She spoke several languages fluently. She listened more than she spoke, and when she did speak, people remembered her words. She was not ornamental. She was formed. Her mother understood the cost of this education. She also understood the reality of dynasties. In a Europe stitched together by marriage contracts, personal happiness was not a priority. Daughters were not raised for themselves. They were prepared for transfer. When the offer came from Brandenburg, Prussia, it was framed as honor, safety, advancement, a rising power seeking alliance with Hanover. Sophia Charlotte was told she would be queen one day. What she was not told was the price. The first meeting with her future husband was cold and brief. He was still mourning another woman, a wife who had died young and left behind a child and a wound that had not healed. Sophia Charlotte saw it immediately. She was not chosen for love. She was chosen for continuity. He saw her beauty before he saw her mind. He admired her youth as one admires spring after a harsh winter. She saw a man obsessed with ceremony and appearances, a man who mistook control for strength. From the beginning, they misunderstood each other. Their marriage sealed her departure from the only life she had known. When she left Hanover, she did not cry. She observed. She memorized the sound of familiar halls. She carried books with her. She believed knowledge could protect her anywhere. Berlin taught her otherwise. The Prussian court did not reward intelligence. It rewarded obedience. Days were scripted down to the minute. Movements were watched. Speech was measured. Everything was rigid. Fear hid beneath etiquette, like rot beneath polish. Sophia Charlotte felt herself shrinking, not in confidence, but in space. There was no room for her thoughts, no patience for her questions. Music became background noise. Conversation became performance. Her husband thrived in this environment. He hid behind pomp and ritual. She suffocated under it. Nights brought no closeness. Intimacy was another obligation, another reminder of her purpose. Still, she tried. She tried to adapt. She tried to be agreeable. She tried to believe that fulfilling her role would earn her safety, that producing an heir would secure her place, that time would soften suspicion. What she did not understand yet was this: the court was not waiting to accept her. It was waiting to use her. And once she served her function, it would no longer need her mind, her voice, or her survival. Sophia Charlotte had been trained to think freely. Now she was learning what happened to free minds inside cages. Pregnancy became her strategy. Not a joy, not a miracle, a calculation. Sophia Charlotte understood the rules now. In this court, affection meant nothing. Intelligence meant nothing. Even innocence meant nothing. Only one thing mattered: results. An heir would buy her time, perhaps safety, perhaps a fragile form of acceptance. She told herself that once she fulfilled her duty, the whispers would soften. The knives would lower. The eyes would stop measuring her value with every breath. So she tried to believe. When her pregnancy was announced, the court reacted with relief rather than happiness. Bells rang, cannons fired, faces smiled with practiced enthusiasm. For them, this was not a child. It was a solution. For Sophia Charlotte, it was something more dangerous: hope. She imagined motherhood as a shield, as proof that she belonged. She imagined that carrying the future of the dynasty inside her would force the court to see her as human, as necessary, as untouchable. She even attempted reconciliation. Against every instinct, she reached toward the woman everyone feared, the stepmother, the one surrounded by death and rumor. Sophia Charlotte chose to believe that beneath ambition there might be decency, that beneath suspicion there might be loyalty to family. It was a mistake. The response was not kindness, it was humiliation. A rumor began to move through the palace like smoke, quiet, persistent, impossible to catch. It claimed that Sophia Charlotte had not arrived pure, that her virtue was compromised, that the child she carried might not be legitimate. Nothing could have been more effective. The court did not confront her. It watched her. Glances lingered on her growing body. Conversations paused when she entered. Respect thinned. Her pregnancy, which should have protected her, became another vulnerability. She learned then how cruelty worked here. It did not shout, it implied. Still she endured. She followed every instruction, ate what she was given, spoke when spoken to, smiled when required. She rested when ordered and appeared when summoned. She behaved perfectly because perfection was her only defense. When the child was born, the palace erupted in celebration. A boy, healthy, loud, alive. For a moment she believed she had won. That moment did not last. The child died before the joy could settle. No illness was announced, no explanation offered. One day the cradle was occupied. The next day it was empty. The court moved on quickly, too quickly. Condolences were brief. Eyes avoided hers. The silence that followed was heavier than grief. Because in this place, silence meant suspicion, and suspicion always searched for a target. Sophia Charlotte was not given time to mourn. Her loss was not private. It was political. The death of her child was already being weighed, already being interpreted, already being used. She understood the truth with terrifying clarity. The court did not need her sorrow. It did not even need her obedience. It needed results. And she had failed. Her belief that duty could save her collapsed entirely. Pregnancy had not protected her. Good faith had not softened cruelty. Trust had only exposed her further. She had tried to redeem herself through obligation. The court did not forgive failure. It simply waited for the next attempt. The palace did not collapse after the tragedy. It adjusted. Ceremonies continued. Councils met. Dinners were served on time. Power absorbed the loss and moved forward, as if nothing essential had been damaged. That was when Sophia Charlotte understood the court for what it truly was. Death was not an interruption. It was a variable. What followed was not mourning, but repositioning. Old alliances shifted, ambitions resurfaced. The absence left behind became an opening others rushed to exploit. Without a living heir, every fear returned sharper than before, and fear always searched for a body to attach itself to. Sophia Charlotte felt the change immediately. Not sympathy, caution. She had become a symbol of instability, a reminder of failure. Her presence altered rooms not with emotion, but with calculation. No accusation was ever made. None was needed. In a system ruled by silence, exclusion was the verdict. Doors opened less often. Decisions were made without her. She was no longer consulted, only informed. Her influence narrowed. Her value quietly diminished. She realized then that grief was not the danger. Invisibility was. The court did not punish openly, it erased. From that moment, she stopped expecting clarity. Every gesture now carried intent. Every kindness hid purpose. She began watching instead of trusting, listening instead of speaking. The loss had not weakened her. It sharpened her. She no longer mistook politeness for loyalty or proximity for protection. Compliance did not earn safety. It only delayed disposal. This was the point of no return. If the court did not need her as a human being, she would no longer offer herself as one. From here forward, she would not seek acceptance. She would seek distance. Because the final illusion had died. The belief that anyone here could be trusted. The birth of the surviving child was announced with relief rather than joy. Bells rang across the capital, not in celebration of a life, but in gratitude that the bloodline had not broken. Courtiers smiled again. Advisors slept easier. For the first time in years, the future appeared secured. For the mother, hope returned quietly. She watched the infant breathe and believed that suffering had finally earned meaning. This child lived. This child would stay. In the soft hours before dawn, she allowed herself to imagine something forbidden in that palace. A bond not defined by duty, a human connection untouched by ambition. But signs emerged early. The child did not cry for comfort. He demanded. When nurses hesitated, his screams sharpened. When servants moved too slowly, he learned to glare, to stare with a cold focus that silenced rooms. Even as a toddler, he understood fear before he understood words. The court dismissed it as strength. They praised his intensity, his refusal to submit, his sharp memory and quicker temper. Tutors reported his intelligence with unease. He remembered insults. He repeated lies without blinking. He learned how adults reacted, then shaped himself accordingly. Tears when watched, smiles when rewarded, silence when plotting. The mother noticed everything. She saw how animals avoided him, how other children shrank back, how he delighted not in winning games, but in breaking rules without consequence. When corrected, he did not feel shame. He studied the correction itself, measuring weakness. She tried to guide him, to soften him, to teach restraint, mercy, patience. She spoke of kindness in private rooms where no spies lingered. She held his hands and asked him to listen. He listened. Then he used what he learned. He learned which words calmed her, which expressions earned trust, which gestures created the illusion of obedience. Behind her back, servants whispered. Objects went missing. Punishments were assigned to others for his actions. By the time accusations reached her, the truth was already buried. The court adored him. At last, they said, a ruler who would not hesitate, a king who would not feel. They stopped watching him as a child and began shaping him as a weapon. They taught him power without limits and authority without accountability. And they praised the mother. She had succeeded. She had delivered what the crown demanded. That was the moment she understood. Her suffering had not been a trial. It had been a process. Every loss, every humiliation, every forced endurance had shaped her into the vessel required to produce this heir. Not a soul, not a conscience, but a perfectly adapted instrument. She had given birth to what the throne needed, not what humanity needed. At night, she lay awake listening to palace corridors breathe. Somewhere beyond the walls, a future hardened around her child. She felt no pride, no triumph, only a quiet terror. Fate had not betrayed her. It had used her. She did not revolt. There was no public defiance, no dramatic refusal, no challenge spoken aloud. She understood the cost of open resistance in that palace. It ended with silence, with locked doors, with history rewritten by others. So she chose another path. She withdrew without leaving. Her presence remained at court, proper and restrained, but her attention shifted elsewhere. She stopped attending councils where decisions were made like executions. She no longer tried to shape policy or soften cruelty with reason. Instead, she began to build something quieter, a separate world. It started with rooms no one cared about, forgotten galleries, abandoned halls once meant for ceremony. She filled them with painters, musicians, scholars, and poets who had nowhere else to go. Men and women dismissed as irrelevant because they produced nothing measurable. No armies, no gold, no heirs. In her rooms, they were welcomed. Art returned to breath. Music returned to linger. Conversation was allowed to wander without being corrected or reported. People spoke without calculating consequences. Ideas were explored without fear of punishment. For the first time in years, voices were not instruments. They were human. She did not announce this sanctuary. She protected it through neglect. The court ignored anything that did not increase power. That indifference became her shield. Servants noticed the change first. They spoke of rooms where laughter existed, of evenings where no one watched the door, of a woman who listened more than she spoke. She asked questions no one else asked, about grief, about guilt, about what people remembered before ambition erased them. These gatherings did not weaken the throne. That was the mistake. They strengthened something else. People left her rooms altered, less obedient, more reflective. They began to see the machinery of the court for what it was. They still served, still bowed, still obeyed, but something inside them resisted quietly. That kind of resistance was dangerous. She never spoke against her child, never condemned the ruler he was becoming, but she refused to shape him further. She withdrew from instruction, from guidance, from approval. Her absence became its own statement. The court noticed. They accused her of irrelevance, of retreat, of softness disguised as virtue. They whispered that she was weak, that she had abandoned duty after fulfilling it. They were wrong. She had redefined duty. She understood that she could not stop the machine, but she could preserve what it tried to erase: memory, meaning, the idea that life could exist beyond power. That was her rebellion. No blood was spilled, no decrees overturned, no crowns fell. But something precious survived. The court never forgave her for that. Because tyranny can tolerate enemies, it cannot tolerate alternatives. By creating a space where humanity endured, she exposed the lie at the heart of the palace: that cruelty was necessary, that fear was order, that silence was peace. She offered proof that another way existed. And for that, she was marked. Not as a traitor, but as a threat. She was 36 when she died. No crown at her side, no allies waiting outside the door, no enemy bothering to finish what power had already done. The court called it natural. History barely noticed. Her death did not interrupt anything. Councils met the next morning. Letters were sealed. Decisions were signed. The palace continued to function with the same precision it always had. Whatever she had been, the machine no longer required her presence. There was no public mourning, no official silence. Her name appeared briefly in records, a date, a title, a polite sentence. Then she was reduced to a footnote attached to greater men and darker outcomes. That was the final humiliation. She was not remembered as a ruler, not as a rebel, not even as a failure. She was remembered as incidental. And yet her legacy had never been meant to survive on paper. It lived in places the court could not document. In the quiet certainty of servants who had once been spoken to as equals, in artists who had learned that beauty did not need permission, in minds that had briefly experienced dialogue instead of command. These things left no archive. They survived as memory. After her death, those rooms were closed. Music was dismissed. Conversation was monitored again. The court believed it had corrected an anomaly, order restored, silence reimposed. But what had been seen could not be unseen. She had not changed the throne. She had not softened the future ruler. She had not prevented cruelty from becoming policy. By every metric of power, she had failed. That was the verdict history preferred. But she had accomplished something the court never forgave. She refused transformation. She did not become cruel to survive. She did not weaponize suffering for influence. She did not disguise obedience as virtue. When she understood the system could not be redeemed, she chose something quieter and more dangerous. She preserved her dignity inside a structure designed to erase it. That choice removed her from the narrative of victory. History sides with those who leave monuments, with those who rule longer, with those who win visibly. She did none of that. She did not win. But she did not submit either. In a palace built to manufacture obedience, she remained unuseful to tyranny. That was her final act. Not rebellion, not martyrdom, refusal. The court survived her, but it never erased what she proved. That power is not the same as legitimacy. That silence can still carry judgment. That dignity does not require recognition. She died without triumph, but she did not die hollow. If you want more stories of forgotten figures crushed by power yet undefeated in spirit stories, The Throne Tried to Bury, subscribe to the channel now.